Move to the back where black people like you should belong. The words weren't shouted, they were whispered, but loud enough for half of first class to hear. The teen froze, boarding pass trembling in his hand. The flight attendant's smile didn't budge, and neither did the quiet stares from polished passengers pretending not to listen. He turned without a word, walked past the suits and champagne. 5 minutes later, the plane stopped taxiing, and when the CEO's voice came, crackling through the pilot's headset, cold, clear, and furious, the entire airline realized they just messed with the wrong black family. The words slipped through the flight attendant's lips in a voice so polished, so cold, it took Jordan a full second to realize she'd actually said them. Not loudly, not in anger, just with a kind of clipped authority that made the insult feel like company policy. Jordan Miles, 17 years old, honor roll student, Atlanta-born, 6'1" and lanky, wearing a neatly pressed track jacket and AirPods he hadn't even turned on yet, stood frozen in front of seat 2A. He looked down at the first-class boarding pass in his hand, his name clearly printed in bold, his upgrade courtesy of his father's frequent flyer status. His voice caught in his throat. "I think there's a mistake," he said, holding the ticket out like a shield. "This is my seat." The flight attendant, a woman in her late 40s with frosted blonde hair wound tightly into a bun, barely glanced at the slip of paper. Her name tag read Candace. Her smile was thin, but her tone was thinner. "I don't think so, sweetheart. We have standards for first class. Let's not make this harder than it has to be." The words weren't as cruel as the look she gave him, the kind reserved for someone who dared to cross a line she didn't believe he had the right to. A man sitting in seat to be middle-aged, white, business casual with an expensive Rolex and cologne you could smell across the aisle chuckled softly, pretending to scroll through his phone. Betty got turned around, he muttered just loud enough. Probably thought 32 meant row 2. Jordan heard that too. He heard it all. "I'm not in the wrong seat," Jordan said again, firmer this time. "You can scan my ticket if you want." But Candace didn't. She didn't scan anything. Instead, she turned to another flight attendant and waved her over. "Can you get airport security? I need to have this young man escorted. He's attempting to sit in first class without authorization." Jordan blinked. He wasn't loud. He didn't shout. His heart hammered like a bass drum under his chest. But he didn't move. He was too stunned. A woman across the aisle adjusted her scarf and leaned toward her husband. "See, this is what happens when they let just anyone in with those point perks." Her husband, a soft-bellied executive type, didn't look up. "I paid full fare. If I wanted kids in saggy jeans beside me, I'd ride Greyhound." Jordan was wearing fitted cargo pants. His clothes were clean. His hoodie had a Spelman College logo. His sister's school. He looked down at himself, then back up. The quiet hum of the aircraft felt deafening now. In less than a minute, 2 uniformed officers boarded the aircraft. Their movements were polite, restrained. One of them, a black man about 40 with tired eyes, looked at Jordan and paused like he'd seen this scene before and hated that he had to play a part in it. "Son," he said gently, "let's just step off for a second. We'll get this cleared up." "I have a ticket," Jordan whispered. "I believe you. But please, just come with us." And so, Jordan walked down the aisle, past the stares, past the smirks, past the woman who smiled and mouthed, "Knew it." No one said a word in his defense. Not even the black couple in row 4 who watched with uneasy eyes, the husband nervously avoiding Candace's glance. There was a silence among the seats, a silence that wasn't neutral. It was complicit. Jordan's hands shook as he reached row 32 in economy, his assigned seat now because no one had technically removed him from the flight, just from first class, just from where he didn't belong. He slid into the cramped middle seat between a snoring man in a tank top and an old woman who looked over and visibly clutched her purse tighter. He stared straight ahead, still said nothing, but he pulled out his phone and texted one person. "Kicked out of 2A. Didn't even check my ticket." It was all he wrote. On the other side of the country, in a corporate tower of glass and steel overlooking a private jet runway, Charles Miles read that message as he stepped into a boardroom. He was a man used to controlling entire fleets. Billion-dollar aircraft contracts lived or died by his word. But this text, this made his blood run cold. He read it again, slowly. Then he turned around, stepped out of the boardroom, and pressed a number on his phone. Back on the plane, Jordan sat stiffly, trying to disappear into the fabric of the seat. Candace walked by once, glanced at him in row 32 with something close to smugness, then returned to first class. The door was sealed. The engines began to hum, The intercom clicked on. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are third in line for takeoff." Then it cut off. Abruptly, there was a pause. A long, strange pause, then the intercom buzzed again. The captain cleared his throat. "Apologies, folks. We've received new instructions from command. We've been asked to return to the gate immediately." Heads turned. Confused murmurs started. Jordan looked up. Heart pounding. He didn't know it yet, but in 5 minutes, the same people who looked down on him would be looking at him very differently, and the name Miles, the one they dismissed, was about to become the only name anyone on that aircraft cared about. The moment Jordan pressed send on his message, he felt the burn in his cheeks start to fade just slightly. He stared out the tiny window in row 32, where the engine rumbled just outside. All he could see were blurs of ground crew and glowing runway lights. What he couldn't see, what no one on the plane saw coming, was the storm that message was about to unleash. Miles above, in a corporate tower lined with steel and glass in Dallas, Charles Miles leaned back in his leather chair, eyes locked on his phone. The message from Jordan blinked softly on the screen. "Kicked out of 2A. Didn't even check my ticket." No exclamation points. No complaints. Just those 12 words. 12 words that snapped something deep inside Charles, a man who had built one of the most successful aerospace companies in the world, who had grown up knowing what it felt like to be followed in a department store, to have people assume he was the hell, to work twice as hard for half the credit. He had fought through all of it to make sure his son never had to feel that weight, but now it had landed right in Jordan's lap, on a plane that bore his company's logo, on a seat he paid for, and in front of people who would rather see a black boy humiliated than a mistake corrected. He stood without a word and walked to his private office, locking the glass door behind him. His assistant, Margaret, looked up from her desk and recognized the fire in his expression. She had seen it once before when a contractor tried to shut out black engineers from a government bid. That contractor no longer existed. Charles dialed a single number. The man on the other end picked up immediately. "Briggs," he said, calm but alert. "Briggs, I need you to get the pilot of Flight 806 on the line. Right now." "The flight's taxiing out of JFK. A pause. "Sir, the flight's already on the runway." I said now, Briggs." He didn't shout. Charles never needed to. His authority wasn't in his volume. It was in his precision. Within 90 seconds, Briggs patched him through to the airline's secure cockpit line, a rare protocol only used in the event of a major security or mechanical issue. But this, in Charles's mind, was a security issue. Captain Leonard, a veteran pilot of 30 years, had just finished confirming takeoff vectors when his radio buzzed. "Flight 806. This is Command Tower override. You have a priority transmission from Orion HQ." Leonard looked at his co-pilot, confused, then pressed a button. "Flight 806 here. Go ahead." A crisp voice came through. "This is Charles Miles, CEO of Orion Aerotrans. Your aircraft is grounded effective immediately. Cut your engines. Taxi back to the gate." The entire cockpit stiffened. "Sir," Leonard replied, unsure if he had heard right, "you have a passenger on board who was removed from first class without cause. Name is Jordan Miles. That's my son. I want the flight attendant responsible removed and replaced before this flight leaves the ground. Is that clear, Captain?" Leonard nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." "Understood." The co-pilot, barely 30, looked like he had swallowed his tongue. "You think it's him?" Leonard said flatly. "And someone just got fired." Inside the cabin, a mechanical voice cut through the air. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been instructed to return to the gate for operational reasons. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The murmurs started immediately. Confusion buzzed in the air like static dot in row 3. Candace, the flight attendant, stood frozen, blinking as the pilot's words sunk in. Her co-worker, a younger Latina woman named Maria, leaned over and whispered, "Did you do something?" Candace scoffed, trying to maintain her smile. "No, probably some tech issue." But her hands trembled as she smoothed her skirt dotted to the rear. Jordan looked up. His phone vibrated again. "Plane's grounded. Sit tight. I've got this." He blinked at the message. For the first time since being escorted to the back, a spark of something unfamiliar stirred in his chest. Not revenge, not even relief, just validation. His dad had believed him, without hesitation, without second-guessing his tone or asking if he did anything wrong. This wasn't over. To the gate, ground operations scrambled. A senior manager named Douglas boarded the plane in a sweat. flanked by 2 replacements from the standby flight crew. He approached Candace and tapped her on the shoulder. "You need to come with me. Now." "Excuse me," she asked, her voice still laced with that passive-aggressive professionalism. "There's been a complaint. A serious one. You're being relieved of duty pending investigation." Candace's face turned a deep shade of pink. "This is about that kid, isn't it? He was trying to scam first class." Maria stepped forward, lips tight. "He had a valid ticket. I saw it." Candace turned to her, eyes blazing. "You're siding with him?" "I'm siding with what's right," Maria replied. The manager didn't wait for more. "You're off the plane now." As Candace gathered her things, her facade crumbling, passengers finally began to piece it together. One man muttered, "Wait, was that the kid from earlier?" A woman with pearl earrings looked mortified. The man in seat 2B, who had sneered at Jordan earlier, suddenly found the floor very interesting. As she exited, Candace passed Jordan on her way out of the back cabin. Their eyes met. For a moment, he thought she might say something, but she just looked down and kept walking. A moment later, Maria returned and stood beside Jordan. "Mr. Miles," she said gently, "the captain would like to invite you back to your seat in first class." "With our sincere apologies." Jordan stood, not proud, not smug, just steady. As he walked back up the aisle, the same aisle that felt like a gauntlet minutes before the cabin was completely silent. Not because they were told to be, but because something had shifted, because power had shifted, and because everyone was now fully aware of just how badly they'd misjudged a teenage boy in a hoodie. He reached seat 2A. The drink tray was refilled, a blanket freshly folded. The man in 2B opened his mouth, then closed it. No words were necessary now. Jordan sat. He took a breath, and finally allowed himself to smile. The jet engines purred back to life, but this time, they wouldn't leave the ground without justice on board. The plane jerked slightly as it reversed direction on the tarmac, an unusual movement that pulled confused glances from every passenger. A low murmur began to swell among the rows of seats. Flight 806 was supposed to be halfway through takeoff roll, but instead, it was coasting back toward the gate. Jordan sat silently in seat 32B, his backpack wedged between his feet, hands folded tightly over his phone. The humiliation still burned on his face. No one looked at him directly now. The curiosity and mockery had shifted into something else. A quiet discomfort. A sense that maybe, just maybe, they'd all just witnessed something that wasn't right. A small boy across the aisle peeked at Jordan with wide eyes, then turned away when his mother gently pulled him close. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking," came a voice over the pack. "We've been instructed to return to the gate due to a personnel matter. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." "Personnel matter?" someone whispered near the front. Did someone forget something? "This is ridiculous. Some of us have connections to catch." The tension deepened when the plane's front door was reopened. A senior gate agent boarded, dressed in a dark blazer, holding a tablet in his hand. He walked straight to the galley area where lead flight attendant Candace stood, arms crossed, mouth tight. "Candace," the man said quietly, but firmly, "I need you to come with me. Now." "What? Why?" "We're in the middle of takeoff prep," she protested, glancing around as eyes turned toward her. "This comes directly from corporate," he said, keeping his voice level but pointed. "There's been a serious complaint. The pilot has been instructed to offload you. A replacement attendant is being brought in now." Her face flushed a deep crimson. "This is about him, isn't it?" she hissed, casting a glance down the aisle toward Jordan. "This is insane." "I was following protocol. He didn't look like he didn't belong up here." The gate agent's face didn't move, but his tone grew sharper. "Your job is to verify tickets, not make assumptions based on who looks like they belong. You had a chance to check his boarding pass. You refused." Candace hesitated, her jaw flexed. "You don't know what it's like working these flights. People try to sneak up here all the time, and that boy didn't. He was upgraded, legitimately. And that's not just any passenger. That's Jordan Miles. His father is Charles Miles." Candace's lips parted, confused. "I don't know who that is." The gate agent leaned closer. "The CEO of Orion Aerotrans, the parent company that owns this airline." Her mouth fell fully open. For a moment, the composure she clung to evaporated. The plane was completely silent now, every passenger either pretending not to listen or blatantly staring. She swallowed hard. I didn't know." "You didn't care," the agent corrected. "There's a difference." "Grab your things." Candace's movements were jerky as she collected her tote and emergency manual. She walked past the rows slowly, trying to preserve a shred of dignity. But when she reached Jordan, still in row 32, she hesitated. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look him in the eye. She just walked on, face burning, and stepped off the plane. Moments later, another attendant stepped on board. A younger black woman in a crisp uniform greeted the passengers with a nod, then went straight to Jordan. "Mr. Miles?" she asked gently. "The captain would like to welcome you back to your assigned seat in first class. If you'll come with me, I'll escort you." Jordan blinked. "Really?" She smiled softly. "Really? And he asked me to make sure you know you did nothing wrong." Jordan stood, and for the first time since boarding, every eye was on him, not with suspicion, but with a strange mix of curiosity and shame. No one said anything, but a few nodded subtly as he passed. The man who had chuckled earlier, the one in the navy blazer, cleared his throat awkwardly as Jordan moved past him, then mumbled, "Glad you're back, son." Jordan didn't answer. He simply walked with quiet dignity, following the attendant down the aisle. When they reached seat 2A, she gestured for him to sit. The leather seat had been cleaned again, the tray reset. A glass of orange juice with ice had been placed there. A warm towel was offered without a word. As he settled in, the pilot himself emerged from the cockpit and approached Jordan. "Mr. Miles," the captain said, "I want to personally apologize for what happened earlier. That behavior was unacceptable and does not reflect the values of our airline. I spoke with your father. He's a man I've respected for years. And after today, I respect you too for how you carried yourself." Jordan nodded, too stunned to speak. The pilot turned to the rest of first class and addressed them openly. "We remind our passengers and our crew, every guest deserves respect. Bias has no place in the skies or anywhere. Thank you for your patience." With that, he returned to the cockpit. The hum of the engines resumed. The plane began taxiing once more, this time uninterrupted. But something had shifted in the air, not the oxygen, not the pressure, something else. A collective realization, a quiet reckoning. Jordan leaned back in his seat, eyes closed for a moment. He hadn't said a word to fight back, but somehow, the whole world had heard him, and they were finally listening. Jordan stepped quietly back into first class, led by a new flight attendant with a dignified air and apologetic eyes. She carried herself differently, not just because of training, but because she knew the cameras were watching, knew who he was now. But more importantly, she seemed to know that what had happened shouldn't be swept away like it didn't matter. "This way, Mr. Miles," she said with calm warmth. "Your seat is ready." He walked back past the same aisle that had felt like a gauntlet just 10 minutes earlier. The same man in the navy blazer was still there, looking at him now with something between guilt and confusion. A woman in pearls coughed awkwardly and turned away. He didn't look at any of them. He sat down in seat 2A, the seat that had always been his, and slowly exhaled as if he were reinflating his dignity. Piece by piece, a fresh bottle of sparkling water waited for him, poured neatly by the new attendant. A warm towel followed. "Please, don't hesitate if you need anything," she said softly. "And, I'm so sorry, sir." Jordan nodded once. He wasn't sure if he wanted an apology. He wanted the why. Why had no one stood up? Why had everyone just assumed? The captain himself soon appeared, a tall man with silver hair and quiet authority. He crouched by Jordan's seat so they were at eye level. "Mr. Miles," he began, his voice measured, "I want to offer my personal apology for what happened. This was not only inappropriate, it was unacceptable." Jordan gave a slow blink. "Would it have been unacceptable if I didn't have a CEO dad?" The question cut deeper than any lecture. The captain paused, choosing his next words with care. "It should be," he said. "But I understand your meaning, and I promise this won't be ignored." Then the pilot turned to the rest of the cabin. He stepped into the aisle and took the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice came over the speaker, "before we resume our flight, I'd like to address something important. A passenger, Mr. Jordan Miles, was wrongly removed from first class during boarding. This should never have happened. We remind our staff and our guests that every passenger deserves respect and equal treatment, no matter how they look, how they dress, or who they are." There was an awkward ripple of shifting legs and cleared throats throughout the cabin. A few passengers looked down at their hands. Others stared straight ahead, unmoving. No one clapped. But the silence now wasn't smug, it was humbled. In the back of the plane, a woman had quietly filmed the whole announcement. Her post had already gone viral. 17-year-old black kid kicked out of first class cause the flight attendant didn't like the look of him. His dad's the airline CEO. Now they grounded the whole damn plane. Hashtag first class while black respect his salary. By the time the plane finally took off, the video had over 1 million views. Mid-flight, Jordan pulled out his phone. There were dozens of unread texts and pings from friends, teachers, even people he hadn't spoken to in years. But there was one text from his father that stood out. Charles Miles. Proud of how you handled yourself. They saw your strength before they knew your name. Jordan smiled faintly. He looked out the window at the clouds below, then down at the polished tray table in front of him. It didn't feel like a victory, not really. Not when dignity had to be defended with power. But it was something. It was justice in motion. Near the end of the flight, the man in the navy blazer finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "About earlier. I thought you were. I just assumed." Jordan turned to him, calm but unflinching. "You didn't need to say anything to get me kicked out," Jordan said. "You just had to stay quiet. That's how it always works." The man's mouth moved, but no words came. Just a slow nod, like maybe he finally understood. Jordan leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. Not to sleep, but to let it all settle. The humiliation, the reversal, the weight of being seen only after someone picked up the phone. He didn't want to be seen because of his last name. He wanted to be seen because he was human. And for the first time that day, in that moment of quiet, flying 30,000 feet above a world still learning, he felt a little closer to being seen. Right. 2 weeks later, Jordan Miles sat beneath the bright lights of a national morning news studio, dressed in a sharp navy suit, no logos, no hoodie, no backpack. Across from him sat journalist Danielle Reese, known for her thoughtful interviews and no-nonsense style. But today, even she looked a little shaken. The clip had been everywhere. Jordan being walked to the back. The cold command. Move to the back where black people like you should belong. Then the reversal, the grounding of the flight, the walk of shame for the flight attendant, and the CEO's statement broadcast across every network. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. But only one person truly owned it. Jordan. Danielle said, leaning forward, her voice gentle but firm. "You've had a whirlwind couple of weeks. How are you holding up?" Jordan glanced toward the camera. His palms were lightly sweaty, but his eyes were steady. "I'm okay," he said. "Better now. You're trending worldwide. Your story sparked protests, policy reviews at 3 airlines, and even a congressional inquiry into discrimination in air travel. How does it feel knowing that one moment on a plane made all this happen?" He took a breath. "I wish it didn't have to," he said. "I wish I could have just gotten on the plane, sat in my seat, and flown home without someone assuming I didn't belong because of my skin." Danielle nodded solemnly. "But it did happen," Jordan continued, his voice clearer now, firmer. "And what I realized is that it wasn't just about me. It's about how we keep being told in subtle and loud ways that we don't deserve certain spaces. Not unless we prove something. Not unless we wear the right clothes. Not unless we have power behind us." Danielle folded her hands. "And you did. You had your father." Jordan nodded. "Yeah, my dad's the CEO of the airline's parent company. That's why they listened. That's why the plane stopped. But what if he wasn't? What if I was just some regular kid flying home alone?" He didn't need to answer the question. The silence did it for him. Across the country, people of color were reposting the video with their own stories. About being followed in stores. About being asked for extra ID at check-in counters. About being ignored in restaurants or assumed to be staff. The hashtag flying while black was now paired with hashtag justice for Jordan, a rallying cry not for pity, but for dignity. Back at Orion Aerotrans headquarters, Charles Miles had launched a formal diversity overhaul. Sensitivity training wasn't optional anymore, it was enforced, audited, and tied to performance bonuses. The flight attendant, Candice, had been terminated following the investigation and issued a tepid public apology that only added fuel to the fire. But Jordan didn't want revenge. He wanted something to change. Danielle leaned in again. "If you could speak directly to that flight attendant or to anyone who's ever judged someone based on how they look, what would you say?" Jordan looked directly into the lens. "I'd say, I'm not mad that you saw a black kid and thought I didn't belong. I'm sad that we still live in a world where that's your first thought. I'm sad that kindness and fairness have to wait until power shows up." He shifted in his chair. "My name is Jordan Miles. I'm 17. I love coding. I help younger kids with math because I know how hard school can be. I like planes because my dad taught me how to build one out of scrap when I was 9. I want to study aerospace engineering because I believe I can make travel better for everyone. And if you had just asked me, I would have told you all that." Danielle's eyes were wet now. She reached out and gently squeezed his hand. The studio was quiet, not from hesitation, but reverence. "And now," she said softly, The world knows who you are. That night, Jetski Airlines released a new promotional ad during prime time. It featured a young black boy walking down a jet bridge, smiling, confident, greeted with respect. A diverse set of flight attendants welcomed him aboard. No second glances, no whispers, just open doors. The tagline read, "Every seat deserves respect." Jordan wasn't trying to be famous. He didn't want to be a headline. But as he stood at the podium days later at a youth tech conference, wearing a small pin that read "Seen," he realized he had something more valuable than attention. He had a voice, and now finally people were listening.